You're watching the legal breakdown. So, Glenn, as we wait for the Supreme Court to make a decision on this claim by Donald Trump that a president has to have full immunity, we've gotten a ton of questions about the legality of this claim, about the implications for Joe Biden as president. So, I want to go through all of these, and so let's start with this one. Trump has just posted onto Truth Social, doubling down on this idea that he needs complete and total immunity. And one phrase really stuck out at me. He says, even events that cross the line must fall under total immunity, or it will be years of trauma trying to determine good from bad. Is that not just giving the game away here, that he views the presidency as a way for him to be above the law?
I would call that statement a tacit admission or an implied admission. Now, to be fair, Donald Trump didn't say, I crossed the line, but that really is the import
Right.
of what he's saying there. He's suggesting that, yeah, he kind of stepped a toe over, the line that is the criminal laws of our nation. And he wants to be able to do that. Now, first of all, when has Donald Trump ever concerned himself with any other human being? He is obviously saying, I need absolute immunity.
Well,
He
hold on.
doesn't
You don't think he's just doing this out of concern for Joe Biden's powers as president?
he's being a good public servant.
Right. This is not just
Doing
benevolence for on Joe Biden's behalf.
Yeah, he's here to serve us all. Donald Trump, but here's the thing, Brian. Donald Trump has made so many incriminating statements, so many confessions, so many admissions against interest that, this is like a smorgasbord for Jack Smith. He's going to get to pick and choose which are the most sharply and directly incriminating statements by Donald Trump. And remember, some of Donald Trump's, incriminating hit parade, he said things like to his DOJ officials, I don't care if there was no fraud undermining the election's results. Just say there was and leave the rest to me and my Republican allies in Congress. That's one of the most directly incriminating statements regarding somebody's criminal intent that I've ever encountered, right? He also said during a CNN town hall, I took the documents. You saw them there. I did it openly and notoriously. Brian, that's a crime. You're not permitted to take government documents from the possession of the United States government. Donald Trump is like a confession jamboree. So I would actually say this most recent admission that, even when one steps a toe over the line, he still needs absolute immunity. It's incriminating, but it's inferentially incriminating. So many of the other statements I think are going to be more valuable at the end of the day and introduced by Jack Smith at one or both of Trump's federal prosecutions.
Okay, well, as far as the federal prosecutions go, one theory that was brought up in the courtroom was this theory that a president has complete immunity. Is this supported by any legal backing whatsoever?
Brian, there are three sources of law. There are statutes, right? Laws that are on the books. There's precedent. When an appellate court issues a ruling in a case, that becomes what we call case law. It's appellate court precedent. And there's the Constitution. Those are the only three places we can look to see if there's any such thing as absolute presidential immunity. You can scour all three of those sources. There is zero legal support for the notion that a president can commit any and all crimes he wants while in office, and he enjoys absolute immunity against prosecution. Of course, if that were the state of the law, then Gerald Ford would not have had to have pardoned Richard Nixon for his crimes, so he couldn't be what? Prosecuted
Right.
for them. So no, the long answer, it's not a short answer now, is there is absolutely no support anywhere in the law for Donald Trump's claims that he can't be prosecuted for crimes he commits while in office.
Now, this argument being perpetuated by Trump's attorneys that a president can do anything that he wants and he won't face criminal prosecution unless he reaches this new threshold of impeachment and conviction by the Senate. That's 2/3 of the Senate. Was that created out of whole cloth?
Yeah, completely made up. When you read the Constitution, read it, front to back, you will find no support, no support. Actually, you'll find what we call contrary support. It cuts against that claim because, what the Constitution says is that even if a president is impeached by the House and convicted at a Senate trial on the articles of impeachment, he can still be prosecuted. So what Donald Trump's lawyers did was they turned that on its head. They contorted it beyond all rational meaning. And they said, oh, well, that means for him to be prosecuted, he has to be impeached by the House and convicted in the Senate. The problem is, it doesn't say that. It doesn't suggest that. It doesn't infer that. And the three-judge panel that heard Donald Trump's absolute immunity argument told him as much.
They just literally found the most convenient interpretation they could find because they knew that Donald Trump wasn't convicted by the Senate. And so they just kind of reverse engineered a way to claim that he's absolved of any and all guilt, right?
Exactly. Exactly.
Now, if the Supreme Court rules in Trump's favor, what is to stop Joe Biden, who's the current president, from canceling the election with impunity, since there are now no checks to presidential power?
Nothing. Nothing. If a president has absolute immunity, carte blanche to commit any and all crimes while in office, which is what Donald Trump is urging the courts to conclude, then Joe Biden has that same power. I mean, these are absurd arguments. These are like thought experiments, right? If we know we're going to have a dictator moving forward, because all presidents will have absolute immunity, who do you want? You want an evil dictator? You want a benevolent dictator? I mean, these are silly discussions to be having, but you know, these are discussions we will need to have if Donald Trump's position is adopted that any president can commit any crime they want to retain power and they can't be touched. There would literally be no reason and no way to dislodge Joe Biden from the presidency.
Yeah, and hopefully, I mean, we already know what Donald Trump's position is in all of this. Hopefully the Supreme Court recognizes the implications of ruling in Trump's favor on this issue, because, I mean, you and I have spoken at length about this idea that once in office as a dictator, that person would have no need for a Supreme Court, right? Like, they act as a check to a dictator's power. A dictator doesn't need a Supreme Court. So hopefully the Supreme Court recognizes the implications here. To that point, is there any reason that the Supreme Court might err on Trump's behalf beyond just pure partisanship? Is there any valid defense here? I mean, you've already spoken about the fact that there is nothing in the Constitution, nothing in federal statute that would suggest as much. So other than just pure partisan hackery, is there any reason that we would see a ruling in Trump's favor here?
None that I can think of. If the Supreme Court wanted to create out of whole cloth a judicial doctrine of some level of presidential immunity for crimes, you can't stop them, because the Supreme Court is the last stop, for better or worse presently, when it comes to interpreting the meaning of the Constitution. So they could say, this isn't like beyond the realm of possibilities. Look, we're going to say that a president basically shouldn't be prosecuted for actions and decisions he takes while in office, unless they're like really egregious, like trying to unlawfully cling to power when you lost an election. I hope they don't do that, because judges are not supposed to make law. They're only supposed to interpret the law that is made by the legislature or that is expressly found in the Constitution. So I hope they don't do that. I don't think they're going to do it, because, Brian, the point you brought up a minute ago, I think, is dead on. The Supreme Court, I don't think, wants to do anything to reinstall Donald Trump into the White House, to return the reins of power to Donald Trump, because he has already said he will be a dictator on day one, and a dictator would probably go about dismantling a Supreme Court. He'll leave the inferior courts in place, but a dictator does not want a Supreme Court hovering above him, the dictator.
Well, we will await any decision by the Supreme Court on this issue as we wait for this question of immunity to finally be adjudicated, so that we can see Trump's DC prosecution proceed as it should. So as soon as we have any response here from the Supreme Court, we'll bring it to you. For those watching, if you want to follow along, make sure to subscribe to both of our channels. The links are right here on this screen. I'm Brian Taylor Cohen.
And I'm Glenn Kirshner.
You're watching The Legal Breakdown.